Today I'm going to make a chicken and dumpling recipe, and this is one of my favorites. It definitely is better when it sits. We always eat it the day of, but have found that leftovers, like when it has sat for a day, taste even better. The broth will thicken up a little bit more and the dumplings kind of soak up more juice. But don't get me wrong, it is delicious the day of, so I would still definitely make it and eat it the same day. The dumpling recipe comes from my Better Homes and Garden New cookbook. This is an old cookbook that I've had, but there's like 3 or 4 recipes in here, like my chili, that come out of there and I absolutely love. I double the recipe and sometimes I even triple or quadruple it. If I do it the way is out of the book, it's never enough for us, so I always double it because I love leftovers. Alright, so what I start with is I have 8 cups of chicken broth, and you're going to put that in a stock pot or a large saucepan. I can my own chicken broth. What I do, and I'll show you that when we get to the chicken, is I'll buy 2 whole chickens, and I put them in the oven and I will cook them for an hour or so, and then I'll shred the chicken off of it, and then I'll put the chicken with other yumminess into the pressure cooker, and then I'll make chicken broth with that. Alright, so we have 8 cups of chicken broth. I usually put about 4 more cups of water in it to get it up to about halfway point of my stock pot. If you want to put more chicken broth in it, that's fine too. And then I add about a pound of shredded chicken. So this is the chicken that came from or part of the chicken that came from the 2 that I cooked up. So I do this about once every 3 months. I'll buy 2. At Sam's, they're about $10 here for 2. I've also seen them at Aldi's for about the same price. And I get a lot of meals out of it. I probably get 4 or 5 of a pound packages of chicken. I shred them up. This is a mixture of dark and white meat, and then divide them into 1 pound packages, and then suck and seal them. And then I use them for different things. I've made tostados and Mexican type stuff. Tacos, that kind of thing. The last thing I made was enchiladas, but it makes it easy. So you want to get this on the stove while you're making your dumplings. Your dumplings need to be in hot broth, otherwise they just kind of disintegrate into the broth. So I'm going to put this on the stove. Probably put it on maybe a little bit higher than medium. And let it start stewing while we're making our dumplings. Okay, let me get some of this cleaned up. Some of this stuff I don't need anymore. Alright, so again, I have doubled this recipe. You don't have to double it if you just want to try it out. So half everything, but alright, so flour, so 1 cup of flour. And 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And the recipe in the book calls for parsley. I have never added parsley to mine, so I kind of just mix it up. And then to that we're going to add 2 eggs that are beaten. So I'm going to put them in here and then kind of beat them up. All right. and a half a cup of milk. I've used all types of dairy milk, so skim works, 1% works, whole works, 2%. I've not tried non-dairy milk, so if you have tried that and it works, I don't see why it wouldn't work. It shouldn't make that much of a difference. And then we need 4 tablespoons of oil. The recipe just says cooking oil. I use avocado oil, but I have used vegetable and canola. I have not tried olive. That would probably give it a slight change of taste. So a neutral oil, I would say. And then we're just going to mix this. So I used the fork that I whipped my eggs with, and I'll mix it, and it'll start becoming more doughy. You don't want it too sticky, because if it's sticky, then it just sticks to everything. So I'll mix it, and then I usually dig my hands in when it gets to a certain point. And then I kind of squeeze it around. Now, kneading is not necessary. It's just I'm making sure that all the flour is incorporated into the wet ingredients. Now, right now, it is still a little bit sticky, but when I put it on my counter to make into dumplings, I'll put some more flour on the tabletop. Generous with that flour, because not only will it make my dumplings the right consistency, it helps thicken the broth. So honestly, I don't think that you could go too crazy with flour. I've never messed up a batch yet. So kind of make sure that flour is good and incorporated, and then I'm going to roll it out. So I usually roll it out to about 1/8 of an inch. And I continue to make sure that it's not sticking to the table, because that is not fun to get off. So somewhere about there. Again, this is preference to how thick you like your dumplings. I don't like them thicker because they're kind of doughy when they cook. So when I make them a little thinner, then I feel like they're cooking better. All right, so I have a plastic pizza cutter, and that's kind of how I cut them. I just start making lines. My lines are about 3/4 of an inch apart. Again, this is your own preference. My grandma used to make pretty big squares of dumplings. It's really your preference. And I'm not going to get a ruler out. This is homemade food, so I don't really care if it's not all even. So once I cut it all the way, then I go the other direction about the same. Alright, so before I scoop it up, I'm going to add some more flour to the top. So this is so that when I put it into the broth, it'll help thicken the broth up. I'm going to go wash my hands. So I kind of mix it up so that everything has a nice coating of flour on it. I need a dog. Now, I will not put this into my broth until I know my broth is hot enough. It should be almost to the boiling point. If not, boiling won't hurt anything either. So right now we're just going to wait for that to happen. All right, so now it's starting to get pretty hot. It's very close to boiling. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw my dumplings in. And they're going to have a tendency to rise to the top once I get them all in here. And again, all this extra flour and stuff will only help it thicken up. So I'll stir that. And you can see there's pieces of chicken. And then the dumplings are starting to rise. The dumplings do not take long to cook at all. In fact, at this point, they're probably edible. I let them go a little bit longer. I kind of like the sauce to thicken up and the dumplings to be, you know, definitely cooked. So again, I have this cooking on medium. And I'm going to let it cook for about 10 minutes and then we'll come back. I salt and pepper once I get the dumplings in there. Salting is totally up to you. My broth is not salted at all. And then there was no salt in the dumplings. So I tend to put at least a teaspoon. And then I'll taste it once it's like sat for a while. And then I'll probably add more. Pepper, I just kind of throw in maybe a half a teaspoon. My husband really likes pepper, so if I don't put it in now, he'll put it in later. So you can kind of see how the broth is kind of getting thicker. It smells delicious. And again, the dumplings tend to float. Once this is sat overnight, they won't float as much. I think they kind of get saturated and then their density changes to a little bit, something a little bit thicker. All right, so I'm thinking it is pretty close to being done. If you don't like your dumplings to be doughy, I would suggest making this ahead of time and letting it sit longer. I will turn this off and throw it into a container and put it into the refrigerator, and then we'll probably have it for dinner sometime this week. I like to make things ahead of time. By that time, the dumplings aren't very doughy. They're more just like dumplings. If you eat it as is right now, I'm not saying it's not delicious. It is absolutely delicious, but the dumplings they're not as cooked. I shouldn't say cooked, but they're just a little bit more gummy than what you would expect a dumpling to be if it sat longer. All right, so as you can see, it's thickened up pretty good. The longer it sits, the more it'll thicken up, but it is a very good consistency right now. If I spoon up, I should get, you know, a good amount of dumplings with chicken. And this does store very well. It does not freeze very well. I have put it in the freezer, and then when I warm it back up, the dumplings tend to kind of do like what you would expect a pasta to do. They kind of disintegrate and they're really nothing anymore. So it doesn't freeze well, but it does refrigerate very well. This will eat on probably 2 or 3 days at least. And the longer each day, as each day goes by, the more delicious it is. So thank you for watching me today, and hopefully you'll enjoy this recipe. Bye.